The MDNA World Tour stop at Sao Paulo's Morumbi Stadium on December 4, 2012, was supposed to be just another spectacular show in a tour that had already broken records across 4 continents. 80,000 people had packed into the massive stadium. The stage was set with millions of dollars worth of production equipment, and Madonna was about to perform Like a Prayer, one of the most technically complex numbers in her setlist, requiring perfect synchronization between lights, sound, video screens, and a 20-piece band. Nobody expected that within the next 15 minutes, a complete power failure would transform what should have been a disaster into the most legendary performance of Madonna's 30-year career. The concert had been going flawlessly. Madonna was 2 hours into the show, and the energy in Morumbi Stadium was electric. She'd performed hit after hit, with the precision and spectacle that MDNA was famous for. Elaborate costume changes, acrobatic dancers, massive video screens showing close-ups and graphics, and a sound system so powerful you could feel the bass in your chest from the cheap seats. Like a Prayer was scheduled as the emotional centerpiece of the show. The staging was elaborate. Madonna would stand on a raised platform surrounded by gospel singers in white robes. Massive stained glass window projections would appear on the screens behind her, and lighting would shift from dramatic shadows to brilliant illumination as the song built to its climax. The technical cues were programmed down to the millisecond. Everything had to work perfectly or the moment would be ruined. Madonna took her position on the platform. The gospel singers arranged themselves around her. The opening notes began, that distinctive church organ sound that everyone in the stadium recognized instantly. 80,000 people started screaming in recognition. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Madonna opened her mouth to sing the first line, "Life is a mystery," and then everything went black. Not just the stage lights, not just the screens, everything. The sound system cut out mid-note. The lights died completely. The video screens went dark. Even the emergency lights failed. Morumbi Stadium, packed with 80,000 people, was plunged into absolute darkness and total silence. For about 3 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. 80,000 people in complete blackness, trying to understand what had just happened. Then someone screamed. Then another person. Panic started to ripple through the crowd. People couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. They didn't know if this was part of the show or if something terrible was happening. The darkness was so complete that people lost their sense of direction, their sense of space. Some started pushing toward what they thought were exits. Others froze in place, afraid to move. Backstage, Madonna's tour manager was already on the phone with the stadium's electrical team, trying to understand the scope of the problem. The news was bad. A transformer had blown. The entire stadium's power grid was down. The backup generators had failed to kick in, some kind of circuit issue. There was no quick fix. This wasn't going to be resolved in minutes. This could take hours. The tour manager's immediate instinct was to evacuate the stadium. In total darkness, with 80,000 people, the risk of a stampede was real. People could get hurt. This was a safety emergency. The show was over. But on stage, in the pitch blackness, Madonna was making a different calculation. She could hear the panic starting to build in the crowd. She could hear people shouting, the sound of movement, the edge of fear in voices around her. She knew that if people started running in this darkness, if a stampede started, people would die. Not might die, would die. Crowd crushes in stadiums kill people every year, and this was the perfect setup for disaster. She needed to stop the panic, now. Madonna took a deep breath and started singing. No microphone, no amplification, just her voice, raw and unenhanced, carrying as far as it could into the darkness. Life is a mystery. Everyone must stand alone. The effect was immediate. The people nearest to the stage, maybe the first few rows, heard her voice and stopped moving. They stopped screaming. They listened. Madonna kept singing, pouring every ounce of volume and power she had into her voice. She'd trained as a singer for decades. She knew how to project. She knew how to fill a space with her voice without amplification. But Morumbi Stadium held 80,000 people and was the size of several football fields. Her voice, as powerful as it was, could only reach so far. The people in the front heard her clearly. Those in the middle heard something, a voice singing Madonna. Those in the back heard nothing. They were still panicking, still pushing, still trying to find a way out of the terrifying darkness. And then, something extraordinary started to happen. The people near the front, the ones who could hear Madonna singing, pulled out their phones and turned on the flashlights. Hundreds of small lights appeared in the darkness, creating enough illumination for people nearby to see faces, to see that others were calm, to understand that they weren't alone. More importantly, as soon as people had light, they could see that Madonna was still on stage, still performing, still in control. And if she was still performing, that meant this wasn't a catastrophe. That meant they were safe. The lights spread like a wave. One section would light up, then the people around them would pull out their phones, then their neighbors would do the same. Within 30 seconds, thousands of phone lights were creating a constellation effect throughout the stadium. Within a minute, 80,000 people had their phone lights on, transforming the pitch-black stadium into a galaxy of tiny stars. And Madonna kept singing. No microphone, no backing track, no instruments, just her voice, a cappella, filling the now illuminated stadium with one of the most iconic songs ever written. The people who could hear her directly started singing along, quietly at first, almost reverently, as if they didn't want to drown out her voice. But as more people joined, the collective singing grew louder. The people who couldn't hear Madonna directly could hear the people around them singing. Soon, 80,000 people were singing like a prayer together in the dark, their phone lights swaying in rhythm, creating a wave of light and sound that was nothing like the technically perfect production that had been planned, but was infinitely more powerful. Madonna continued singing, verse after verse, her voice getting stronger as she realized what was happening. She couldn't see much beyond the first few rows. The phone lights created enough ambient glow to make out silhouettes and movement, but not detail. But she could hear. She could hear 80,000 voices joining hers, carrying the song with her, transforming a technical disaster into something transcendent. The gospel singers who'd been arranged around her on the platform joined in. They'd trained their whole lives to sing without microphones in churches, and their voices blended with Madonna's, creating harmonies that cut through the darkness. The combination of Madonna's lead vocals, the gospel choir's harmonies, and 80,000 people singing together created a sound that nobody in that stadium would ever forget. When the song reached the chorus, "Like a prayer, I'll take you there," the stadium erupted, not in panic, but in joy. People were singing at the top of their lungs, swaying their phone lights in time with the music, dancing in the darkness, crying from the beauty of it, holding on to each other as they sang. Madonna reached the bridge of the song, and without thinking about it, without planning it, she started improvising. She sang lines from other songs she'd written. She added runs and vocal flourishes she'd never done before. She was performing in the purest sense. No technical perfection, no programmed cues, just a human being with a voice, sharing that voice with other human beings in the dark. The crowd responded to every improvisation. When she went high, they went high with her. When she came back down to the melody, they came back down. When she held a note, 80,000 people held it with her. The connection between performer and audience was so direct, so unmediated by technology that it felt almost primal. Backstage, Madonna's crew was watching on emergency battery-powered monitors that showed heat signatures from the crowd. They could see the swaying movement of 80,000 people, all moving in rhythm, all singing together. The tour manager, who 5 minutes earlier had been ready to evacuate the stadium, stood watching in amazement as Madonna single-handedly prevented a potential tragedy and turned it into magic. 4 minutes into the power outage, 4 minutes of Madonna singing a cappella with 80,000 people in a dark stadium. The backup generators finally kicked in. The lights started coming back on, dim at first, then gradually brighter. The video screens flickered to life. The sound system powered up with a loud crackle. Madonna stopped singing. She stood there on the stage, now visible again under the restored lights, looking out at a sea of 80,000 people who were still holding their phones up, still creating that constellation effect even though the stadium lights were back. The crowd erupted in applause. Not the usual concert applause, but something different. Louder, more sustained, more emotional. People were screaming and crying and hugging each other. The applause went on for 5 full minutes. Madonna just stood there, taking it in, her hand over her heart. Finally, she picked up a microphone that was now working again. "Sao Paulo," she said, her voice now amplified through the massive speakers. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced in my entire career." The crowd roared. Madonna wiped tears from her eyes. "I have been performing for 30 years, she continued. "I have played stadiums all over the world. I have had every piece of technology available to make shows bigger and more spectacular. And none of it, none of the lights, none of the screens, none of the production, none of it has ever been as powerful as what we just did together in the dark." She paused, looking out at the thousands of phone lights that were still glowing. "You could have panicked," she said. "You could have run. You could have been afraid. But instead you pulled out your lights and you sang with me. You turned darkness into light. You turned fear into music. You reminded me why I do this." The applause was deafening. Madonna stood there for another moment, then smiled. "Should we finish the show?" she asked. The crowd screamed yes. And for the next 45 minutes, Madonna performed the rest of her set list with an intensity and emotion that even her crew had never seen before. Every song felt different. Every moment was charged with the awareness that something special had just happened. When the concert finally ended, Madonna didn't want to leave the stage. She stood there for 15 minutes after the final song, looking out at the crowd, as if she was trying to memorize every face, every light, every moment. Backstage, her tour manager approached her. "Madonna, the stadium management is filing an incident report. They need to know if you want to press charges against the electrical contractor for the power failure." Madonna looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Press charges? Are you kidding? That power failure was the best thing that's ever happened to me on stage. If I could, I'd pay them for it." Within hours, videos of the a cappella performance started appearing on social media. Dozens of people had managed to record the darkness, the phone lights, and the sound of 80,000 people singing together. The videos went viral immediately. By the next morning, the Sao Paulo power failure performance had been viewed tens of millions of times. News outlets around the world covered it. Other artists tweeted about it. It became the most talked about concert moment of 2012. Music critics called it revolutionary. In an era when concerts are increasingly about technology and spectacle, one reviewer wrote, "Madonna reminded us that the most powerful thing about music is the human voice and the connection between people. No amount of production can replicate what happened in Sao Paulo when the lights went out." Fans who'd been at other MDNA tour stops started saying they wished they'd been at Sao Paulo instead. The technically perfect shows with all the lights and screens and choreography suddenly felt less special than the one where everything failed and Madonna sang in the dark with just her voice and 80,000 phone lights. Madonna herself talked about it in almost every interview for the next year. "People ask me about my greatest performances," she said in a 2013 interview with Rolling Stone. "They expect me to talk about the Super Bowl or Live Aid or some other big televised moment. But Sao Paulo is my answer. Always Sao Paulo. The interviewer asked her why. Because it was real, Madonna said. Everything else I do is so calculated, so rehearsed, so technically perfect. But in Sao Paulo, when the power went out, I had to make a choice in about 3 seconds. Do I let people panic, or do I do something? And I did the only thing I knew how to do. I sang. No microphone, no auto-tune, no backup dancers. Just me and my voice, and 80,000 people who decided to sing with me instead of running. She paused, getting emotional even a year later. That's what music is supposed to be, she said. It's supposed to be humans connecting with other humans. It's supposed to be voices joining together. It's supposed to create light and darkness, literally in this case. All the technology I use in my shows, all the production, all the spectacle, it's wonderful and I love it. But it's not the point. The point is the connection. And when everything else was stripped away, when it was just voices in the dark, that connection was so powerful it stopped a panic and turned a disaster into something beautiful. The tour manager who'd been ready to evacuate the stadium admitted in a later interview that he'd learned something that night too. I've worked in concert production for 25 years, he said. My job is to make sure the technical elements work perfectly. When that power went out, I thought the show was over. I thought we'd failed. But Madonna showed me that the show was never about the lights or the sound system. It was about her and the audience. The technology is just there to help, but it's not essential. What's essential is the human connection, and that doesn't need electricity. The electrician who'd been responsible for the transformer that failed sent Madonna a letter months later. He'd been devastated when he realized his error had caused the power outage. He'd been certain he'd be fired, blacklisted from the industry, ruined professionally. Instead, Madonna's team had sent him a message. Best mistake you ever made. Thank you for giving us the most memorable night of the tour. The letter from the electrician said, I spent weeks terrified that I'd ruined your show. Then I saw the videos. Then I read what you said about it. And I realized that sometimes our biggest mistakes can become our greatest gifts if someone knows how to transform them. You took my failure and made it beautiful. Thank you for that. I'll never forget it. To this day, when fans talk about Madonna concerts, Sao Paulo 2012 comes up more than almost any other show. Not because of the production values or the technical perfection, but because of what happened when everything technical failed, and what remained was just music and humanity and 80,000 points of light in the darkness. The lesson wasn't lost on other artists. After Sao Paulo, multiple performers started incorporating moments in their shows where they'd turn off all the production and just sing a cappella with the crowd. But none of them captured quite what happened that night in Brazil, because none of them had the same context. The genuine disaster, the real fear, the spontaneous choice to sing instead of evacuate, and the collective decision by 80,000 people to create light and join their voices instead of running. Madonna put it best in that Rolling Stone interview. You can't plan a moment like Sao Paulo. You can't rehearse it. It happened because the lights failed, because people were scared, because I made a choice, and because 80,000 people made a choice. We chose connection over fear, music over panic, light over darkness. And for 4 minutes, we created something that no amount of production budget could ever create. We created magic, the kind that only happens when humans choose to be human together. If this story moved you, if you've ever been in a moment where disaster became beauty, where fear became connection, where technology failed but humanity prevailed, share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful things don't need electricity. They just need people willing to sing together in the dark. Subscribe for more stories at the moments when everything goes wrong and somehow becomes exactly right. And remember, you don't need perfect conditions to create something beautiful. You just need courage and community and a willingness to make light where there is none.